Hello, everyone, and welcome inside the Week 11 edition of the Fantasy Champion Show. I'm Nick Anastos, my good friend Bob Morin alongside with me. As you can see, a fan-friendly set today, Bob.
Yeah, I like
You're
it.
rooting for the home team. I'm rooting for my home player, Steven Jackson, a big week in Week 10, and we'll jump right into the shout-outs. First of all, the 49ers, perhaps the most feared defense against the run in the league. Steven Jackson, so-so year up to this point. Some owners may be frustrated. Comes out, goes over 100 yards, gets in the end zone, and may have bailed out a few fantasy owners across the country.
Yeah, I don't think many people were playing him, though. Obviously going into the week, you weren't going to play him. I know myself, I have him in a league or two and sat him and obviously regret it. But, yeah, he looked good, and I look for him to hopefully keep that trend going the rest of the year.
What'd you like in Week 10?
I just thought he was, his power self. He looked like he has his whole career, his first 100-yard game, too, of the year. So that was encouraging, especially, like we said, against the Niners. It's pretty good. I was pumped to see it.
What about in Cincinnati? Big win for the Bengals, led by Andy Dalton, 4 touchdown passes.
Yeah, that's good to see. I'm going to give him a shout-out. He's on my team as a backup. He didn't play this week for me. Actually did better than Tom Brady. 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. So on the right way for him.
Speaking of quarterbacks in Week 10, obviously the highlight was the amount of injuries. 3 concussions and a shoulder injury really hurt some fantasy owners across the country. Vic looks like he's doubtful in Philadelphia. Big Ben separated shoulder in Pittsburgh. He's out against Baltimore at least. And then the Monday night matchup between the Bears and Niners features 2 guys who are also up in the air at this point, Alex Smith and Jay Cutler. What are fantasy owners to do?
A lot of guys, I think are acceptable replacements. We just talked about Andy Dalton. There's a bunch of guys, that we can touch on that we will here in the start 'em, sit 'em. But I wouldn't be too worried. Besides Big Ben, I think the other guys weren't really playing up to par anyway. So get some new names in the fantasy jungle.
This is the Fantasy Champion Show, week number 11. Leave us your questions on Facebook. We'll read them on the air. You can check us out, of course, at the Fantasy Champion Show. I'm Nick Anastos along with Bob Morin. All right, let's cut through the shenanigans here and get to the stardom sit-ems. Quarterback, like we said, injury-wise, a lot of question marks up in the air. Carson Palmer is a train, unfortunately, that probably left town by this point. A lot of owners last week soaked him up because they needed a replacement for Aaron Rodgers. The Packers were off in week number 10. Palmer now, the last 2 weeks, has gone over 350 yards and has thrown 7 touchdowns as well.
Yeah, he's looked good. He's looked like he did, back in Cincinnati with Chad Johnson. He has some stud receivers. I'm a big fan of Hayward Bay and Denarius Moore. Even with McFadden out, that's obviously upped Palmer's ability here throwing the ball more. So,
by the way, his position rank on the season 8 in ESPN standard leagues, and 34% of owners nationwide able to start Palmer and probably help themselves out last week. All right, the next man on the list facing the New England Patriots, Andrew Luck. 2 touchdowns on the ground last week. Everyone's been raving about how good Luck has been. Fantasy-wise, he hasn't been a stud, but he certainly has helped out your club so far. What do you expect against a weak New England secondary?
Well, this guy, he's had his games. He's been a little inconsistent, as far as fantasy goes, but he's had his games. Reggie Wayne, number 2 in the league in receiving this year, his big weapon. I think
all that stays on track
exactly.
Against the Colts.
It all stays on track against the Pats.
Against the Pats.
They're going to be down. I see Luck throwing the ball a lot, and I don't think they're going to be able to get their running game going. And I think it should be a nice performance for a lot of the Colts on offense.
It is a circus in Philadelphia. Vic, obviously under the gun before the head injury. He probably will not play, and that means the rookie Nick Foles comes in and was kind of thrown not under the bus, but thrown into the fire, so to speak, in the second half of that Dallas game because they came after him. This week, what do you expect in game number 2 for Mr. Foles?
Well, he showed, what he could do in preseason. I don't know, it doesn't mean a lot. A lot of people in Philly and actually, nationally got to see him play and liked what they saw. So a lot of people have been saying Foles for the past couple of weeks now, especially with the way, Vic, he can't really handle the ball. And, playing Washington, stat here, 8 of 9 quarterbacks have thrown for over 300 yards or multiple touchdowns against the Redskins.
So
that's going
option?
in his favor.
Is he an option? Or
I think so. If you're going, you're a team, maybe in the middle of the pack, and you have a bye week this week for your quarterback or injuries, it would be a good replacement, I think. Why not?
All right, here is a guy who is not an option, and that is Joe Flacco this week at Pittsburgh. I know the Steelers are reeling a little bit without Big Ben, but that defense, despite injuries in the secondary, has been the best in the NFL and in fantasy against the pass. Plus, Joe Flacco has a bad track record on the road this season, averaging only 10 fantasy points per game away from Baltimore.
Yeah, we have to remember, week 10, this guy led the whole league in fantasy points, and obviously right now we're not very high on him. And like you said, on the road, it's going to be a tough game. Pittsburgh, maybe their defense.
A lot different from Oakland.
Maybe their defense isn't what it used to be, but I know they're still going to play big games, and, I expect Flacco to be shut down.
Another guy we put on bust alert on the car ride over here was Phillip Rivers with San Diego.
Yeah, we've seen Phillip Rivers struggle when he gets pressured, and this Denver defense, I'm pretty sure they lead the league in sacks, and Von Miller, one of the best pass rushers in the league, he's going to be up Phil's up Phil all day. Sorry, I didn't know what to say there, but you know what I mean. So yeah, I think Rivers will struggle, and I would definitely look for other options.
All right, let's move on to running backs, also a position in flux here in Week 11 on the Fantasy Champion Show with Nick Anastos and Bob Morin. But two of probably the top backs in the league are both on bye. Adrian Peterson with the Vikings, Marshawn Lynch with the Seattle Seahawks. By the way, I own both in my work league. Give you an idea of the depth of the stable in that one. But they're off. Again, it's late in the season, probably too late to really find a consistent option on the waiver wire that could help you out from here on out. But there are some names I think you could maybe plug in or trade for cheap. A lot of trade lines, deadlines, by the way, haven't come up yet in fantasy leagues across the country. Green Ellis, probably on a roster, but you like him this week from a start-him, sit-him perspective.
Yeah, I do. I think just the amount of carries he gets, it's what attracts, I think, anybody to start Ben Jarvis Green Ellis. He's nothing special, but he gets at least 15 carries a game, and he is the primary back, and he's going to get the goal line touches, 9 out of 10 times. So just in that, it doesn't really even matter the matchup. I'm just going to go with him based on that stuff.
And then Jacquizz Rodgers in Atlanta.
I like Jacquizz Rodgers. They've been using him a lot. He's actually outproduced Turner the 2 out of the last 3 games. So, he's an up-and-comer, definitely on the fantasy radar for next year in a bigger role, I'm sure. But would be a nice option for this week at Flex.
What's the story in Atlanta? Because a few weeks ago, Bob Morin made a trade for Michael Turner, a veteran you thought could help. What's the status there?
Apparently, he just isn't what I thought he had left in him. This week we saw against New Orleans, everyone thought would be a nice, sweet matchup for him. He got stuffed, at the goal line 3 times. He potentially could have had, 3 different times. He could have had 3 touchdowns in that game. It would have been a lot different day. But 10 carries, 15 yards, it's just not doing it for me. He just doesn't look that sharp. He had a good game a couple weeks ago, though. I'm not giving up on him. He's just going to be a filling guy from now on. He's not. I thought he could take my number 2 spot or even a flex spot, but he hasn't even done that. So
this is week 11 of the Fantasy Champion Show. MC the Brick behind the camera. Bob Morin to my right. I'm Nick Anastos. Check us out, of course, on Facebook. Send us your questions. We'll get to them next show. Let's take a look at some of the sits for running back. Mr. Jennings in Jacksonville has, I'm not going to use the word disappointed owners, but he probably didn't give you enough over the last 3 weeks. All of them starts, of course, in the absence of Maurice Jones-Drew. Where is not only Jennings at this point, but where is Jacksonville as an offensive unit? Probably not fantasy viable at this point.
Yeah, I think that a lot of it has to do with it. Maybe not Jennings being bad, his offensive line. They have to throw the ball so many times a game, and Jennings just doesn't have enough to get involved. But, if we can look at tape from, the last show we did or 2 shows ago when Jennings was first coming on the scene, I was not sold on this guy. I think we had a pretty good argument about it. You were feeling a lot stronger about him than I was, and, I'm still rolling against him.
Well, look what he did, though. He was up around 100 yards, over 100 yards all-purpose. in the first game 3 weeks ago.
Well, he had 95 and a tackle, so.
No, he had 115, a fumble lost.
Oh, that week, yeah. The week Jones.
So
Drew
he had
went
115 yards.
Okay.
No, it was the week after that. It was his first start.
Okay.
Then he had about 72 yards all-purpose, and then last week hurt me personally by only having 27. They were never in that game. Never
against the Colts, you thought they would have been able to run the ball a little more.
Right, that was the Thursday night game a week ago. So Jennings, at this point, I still think you got to hang on to him, but
don't dump him.
Don't dump him, but probably not start him if you've got better options. He's in that vague category. All right, wide receivers that you like. Oakland, big showdown this week. They got New Orleans, throw. Denarius Moore has been on a tear. Haywood Bay has been better than advertised. Green light with the Raiders.
Yeah, we saw last week, New Orleans, Atlanta have their way with New Orleans. Still lost the game. Their defense did look a little better, but I touched on them in the beginning of the show, Haywood Bay and Denarius Moore, both, I think they're beasts. I enjoy watching them play. And Haywood Bay, had a lot of potential coming in. And Denarius Moore, we saw last year, showed us a lot of things, and I like it. I think they're going to have 10-plus fantasy points easily, both of them.
All right, starts as well for Amendola in St. Louis. You like the matchup against the Jets, and you like overall, or at least I do, what he's been doing all season, right?
Yeah, just in general, from week one on, he's been their best receiver. Last week we saw it. He had a couple of big plays called back, a kick return that was called, or a punt return that was called back, and then an 80-yard screen pass that was called back because of a holding call. So this guy could have had a much bigger game, had 11 catches for about 110 yards last week. I was impressed, and he would definitely be in a league that starts 3 receivers or even a great flex play.
All right, another start-worthy guy, Randall Cobb. Owners who grabbed him early, owners who liked what they saw a year ago as a rookie with the Packers, loved Randall Cobb, and now it looks like the rest of the world is starting to love him as well.
Yeah, you and I have both liked Randall Cobb. We've talked about him before, but he reminds me a lot of another player I really enjoy, which is Percy Harvin. I think both of them have a lot of similar things and a lot going for both of them. And, yeah, he's going to be a big part of the offense this weekend. I would definitely start him.
Now, what about down the road with the potential return of Greg Jennings?
I just think he's such an athlete and a player, a playmaker, that they're going to find a way to get him in there. It's just like Percy Harvin, like I
think
said.
his targets are about the same.
Yeah, exactly. So, no, I really like him. And we were actually talking about this as a good thing to bring up right now, but start or sit. I asked Nick before the show in my league about Randall Cobb or Des Bryant. And, that's maybe good to talk about right now. What would you say on that right now?
Randall Cobb and Des Bryant, that is a tough one. Here's the story.
Well, let me tell you the other 2 receivers first, Roddy White and Calvin Johnson. So I can't sit those guys.
No.
Those are it's a 3-receiver league.
Those are top 5 starts this week,
exactly.
too, based on, pretty much any week. That's a tough one. I think both teams are going to come out and pass.
Yeah. Dallas needs the game more.
Both will probably have a high volume of targets, anywhere from 5 to 8 or 9 even. The Packers in Detroit will throw. I don't know. That's tough, putting me on the spot. Cobb has been hotter as of late, although Bryant's coming off a big game last week against Philadelphia as well with a touchdown.
Sweet touchdown catch.
Yep. I don't know. I'd probably say Bryant after a long debate.
Be a good one to look at for next week to see what happens.
Well, here's why. I think Bryant is the clear-cut Dallas #1, whereas Cobb is, as we know, amongst several options in the Packers passing game.
Yeah.
So,
and it seems like any given week a Packer
could be
comes
wrong.
out. Well, a Packer comes out, a different Packer comes up as a
I love
as
both
the
of them this week as well.
It is a tough one.
All right, sitting. I'm going to start with Torrey Smith and Anquan Boldin as well, if you were thinking about it. Fantasy is all about matchups. The veterans know this. The novices, still learning. They may go with a guy just because A, he's a big name, or B, he's been hot, which are good reasons. But sometimes when the matchup is overwhelmingly difficult, like I think it is in Pittsburgh, they shut down Eli Manning 2 weeks ago. Now, Eli didn't look too good against Cincinnati, I know, but they had kind of a coming-out party. That was a national TV game on Fox that they look good in. And they're #1 against the pass. They're #1 overall defensively in terms of yards allowed. I just don't see Baltimore being able to throw. They might be able to run with Ray Rice, but they're not going to be able to throw, and I just don't see it.
No, let me throw out these names for you for Pittsburgh defense, shutting down receivers. We got A.J. Green, we got Hakeem Nicks, Victor Cruz, and Dwayne Bowe, all held to an average of 5 fantasy points.
Which is unheard of.
Exactly. So we're not making this stuff up. Torrey Smith, I wouldn't play him. We talked about it. We were pretty strong about Bolden and Smith, not play him. So.
Who else don't you like this week? Week 11.
I'm not really too high on Malcolm Floyd. It goes back again to the Phillip Rivers and the pressure that I think they're going to be under all game. There will be a lot of passing going on. I like Denario Alexander better than I like Malcolm Floyd. I just think he might have a better chance of getting open. That's a name to keep an eye out on. But, yeah, I just think that, like you said, matchups. It's just basic.
All right. Time now, before we close the show, Week 11, Fantasy Champion Show. Nick Anastos, Bob Morin, to have our weekly bet. Last week, or last time, we had a controversial ending. One website at one time had it one way, and of course, on the official website, it had it in my favor, but Bob didn't
Let's
like it.
explain the situation.
All right,
what
explain the situation. We set a fantasy total that Rashard Jennings had to hit against Oakland, and we set it at 10 fantasy points, which is equivalent in our league to 100 all-purpose yards. He finished with 115, so he went over, but he was penalized 2 points for a lost fumble, so he's down to 9.5. And then in a more controversial fashion, picked up a tackle, which counted as a point as well, which is a new issue facing our league overall, being year one of the IDP league. So in confusing and controversial fashion, Bob now owes me a 10 spot.
We'll give it to you.
Right.
Now it's 100 fantasy bucks is what our.
Oh, okay, right.
I'm not giving you anything. It's 100 fantasy bucks.
100 fantasy bucks in my pocket.
You're
now,
right, I guess, because of the tackle. Because of the tackle.
Because of the tackle. Double or nothing. In Week 11, we'll focus on a Bob player.
The law firm.
The law firm, familiar to Patriots fans and Bengal fans. Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis. Favorable matchup. What do you think? You obviously give us the total here. We'll be great on 100 yards, right?
Yeah, we were thinking 10 points again. I think it's a fair number. I think in leagues, with projections, he's just for basic leagues, not PPR. He's projected probably around 12 and a half points. So I think 10 is not bad for what we're doing here. So I'm going to say he goes over that. I think Ben's going to get in the end zone this week, and with that alone, he's good for 50 yards at least every week. So I'll say over 10.
I'm going to take the Chiefs. Not take the Chiefs, but I like the way that they defended against Pittsburgh's run game, which was highly feared going into last week. They contained them. They got physical guys. They got a guy named Derek Johnson, who's side to side, maybe one of the best linebackers or the best linebacker in the AFC. I think that they contain Green Ellis. I think the Bengals will find it their advantage to throw and get A.J. Green involved early and often. I think Green Ellis takes a back seat here. I'm taking the under.
Yeah.
And I'm writing it down as well.
I think you've had a long day.
That's correct. All right. We will be back next week. Good luck this weekend. Week 11, playoffs coming up. Yes. Maybe we'll get Peter Shanky from rotowire.com on. Not making any promises, but we might be able to get him
to get some insight,
to drop us a line and steer us in the right direction. For MC the Brick, Bob Morin, I'm Nick Anastos. So long, folks.